Today we're going to be talking about BCacheFS and the back and forth between developers and the main maintainer Kent Overstreet of BCacheFS. This all took a turn for the worse when BCacheFS was seemingly frozen, aka no merge requests are going to be accepted anymore from Linus Torvalds. And as of late, we have not heard anything from Linus as this last patch and pull request was submitted by Kent from quite a while ago now, the 28th of July. There has been no back and forth between Linus and Kent at this point, at least that we've seen publicly on the Linux Kernel mailing list, but there have been many discussions between maintainers and Kent and their thoughts on why this has transpired the way it has. So we gained some history and knowledge by reviewing what other maintainers and Kent have been saying with each other, so we're going to be going through all of this. Everything has been addressed to Linus Torvalds. We'd be silly to believe that he's not watching the threads go back and forth. I think this is important to kind of understand what others are thinking about this whole entire deal and this freeze and some of the arguments from both sides, meaning from Kent and users who support Kent's work and the opposed side, people who believe Kent and BCacheFS should be removed from the kernel. Anyways, we're going to be doing a lot of reading today. I just want to do a forewarning here as I'm going to be reading a lot of threads back and forth on the Linux kernel mailing list. Let's get right into it with where it all started here with the first pull request after the infamous quote unquote were done from Linus, which seemingly meant that Linus Torvalds was done working with Kent and BCacheFS in the Linux kernel. Anyways, this was to Linus from Kent as a pull request here. BCacheFS changes for 6.17. Schedule notes for users. I've been digging through the bug tracker and polling users to see what bugs are still outstanding, and it's not much. So the experimental label is coming off in 6.18. As always, if you hit a bug, please report it. All right, seemingly everything's going as normal here. Just a simple, hey, I got more work that needs to be pulled into the main line. About a week goes by. This is August 5th now. Malte here decides to say something in response to the pull request. So no merge yet. That really is a bummer. I was really hoping to finally be able to run mainline Linux again on my boxes. Yes, I converted all of them to BCacheFS earlier this year. Now that pretty much all issues I was hitting are fixed by this merge request, I mean, at the rate that Kent's tree is stabilizing right now, I am actually considering moving some of my production systems over there, but those will need to run distro kernels, so please merge. I don't want to jump through the hoops to run OpenZFS. Kind regards, Malte. And a bit silly, but I think this is just really prodding for Malte here, trying to figure out whether or not any kind of merge request is going to happen, but really focusing in on their own selfish reasoning that they've moved a bunch of their boxes over to BCacheFS. And this is what sparks much conversation, as it seems that Malte's in support of Kent and BCacheFS. It's really just arguing personal convenience here. And that's where Carl steps in here. If we're giving our personal opinions, I lean the other way. I make no statement about the quality of Mr. Overstreet's code or whether it is or isn't stabilizing. But for me, as someone who's made a career out of Linux, it's not just about code, it's about trust. For me personally, I've made the decision to remove BCacheFS entirely from my personal workstations and lab, where I've been testing and using it extensively for years. It's harsh to say it, but I simply do not trust Kent's decision-making process, nor do I trust him as a person enough for me to be comfortable running BCacheFS. I base this not on what others may have said or written about him, but on my own interactions with him and reading his own words. This can and hopefully will change. People can grow, particularly through adversity. I'm hopeful that if it is decided that BCacheFS will be removed or its in-kernel development pause, Kent may reevaluate what's important and how he deals with people. I look forward to being able to trust BCacheFS again, but that's not right now. Just my 2 cents. And this argument here leads quite the opposite way for merging BCacheFS, arguing for removal or at least pause on the grounds of social and or trust grounds. We haven't seen any specific mentions at this point, and that trust and processes need to be fixed first. Another person chimes in, generally this drama is more like kindergarten. I honestly don't understand why there's such a reaction. It's a management issue, solely a management issue. The fact is that there are plenty of administrative possibilities to resolve this situation. Assign a specific person to handle the issue with Kent if Linus is unable to do so. Simply freeze the patch acceptance for a certain period, explaining the situation and ignoring it if the problem is really there. Then resume work. This has already been done and it was reasonable. Explain to the person who is wrong in the discussion, draw conclusions, and possibly make some exceptions or changes in the process. The main task of the management is to work with engineers, who are often not politically correct or have their own view of the world. If you throw out a successful development that has proven its viability into the cold, I have questions about your actions. Anyway, I have plenty of questions about the Linux Foundation in general. The point is that many remember how the project was born and how it was developed. So tell me, you release a product, you have a well-organized development cycle, you find a problem that prevents your product from being used as advertised, you already have an RC. RC just stands for release candidate. The only way to fix the problem is to add new functionality to one of the product's subsystems. Will you release a product with known issues and later issue an errata? Or will you make the necessary changes provided no one is standing behind you with an axe threatening to cut off your head for a delay in the release? What's so terrible about that? What's so terrible about fixing a bug in a subsystem marked as experimental, which some of your customers use, especially since it will only affect those customers who use this subsystem, as others won't include it in their build process? We don't start adding new features just because you found other bugs sounds absurd. So if we find bugs, they can't be fixed if we need to extend the functionality before the release. Excuse me, what? I clearly understand the absurdity of this requirement because it effectively means that if we notice that ext4 is corrupting data only in RC simply because some code was forgotten to be added to a subsystem during the release window, we can't accept the fix because it requires adding new functionality, and we will release the version with the problem. I clearly understand that this is not the exact situation, but it was done as a solution to an existing user's problem. Moreover, the amount of changes is not that significant, especially since it's not really a fix, but a workaround, a useful one that actually helps some real users in certain situations. But no, instead, this is what happened. Yes, the file system is marked as experimental. However, everyone knows that there are users who use this file system in production environment. It's just how it has historically been. Usually it's Soho, which I believe stands for small office or home office, but that doesn't change much. Everyone knows that the file system has a very interesting design and some features that make it the most optimal solution. At least now it is already successfully used in replacement of LVM cache, DM cache, BCacheFS, etc. No existing file system today offers this functionality. BCacheFS does not offer this functionality on various types of devices. Let's not consider ZFS since it's out of tree project and has a number of problems and limitations. And even though such functionality could be implemented, it's not Soho. Again, small office or home office, meaning just people who use it every day. Therefore, instead of the development, we are getting nonsense in a form of freezing the project or worse, throwing the codebase away entirely. Why? Maybe we should switch from development to degradation. As for the trust issues, we've seen many examples of malicious code being included in the kernel. That's also a trust issue, isn't it? From this perspective, you can't use Linux at all. There's no way. You know you can't have it both ways. Either that or nothing at all. Why these half measures? I somehow feel that we should start with management not throwing the project into the cold. So this was an interesting response as it seems to be reframing the entire BCacheFS dispute as a management and process failure. It doesn't really talk about Kent's interpersonal skills or things that have happened in the background that we are not privy to, which is understandable. I believe some things have been missed here though, including the kernel merge window is about stability, not fairness, and trust has been lost through this whole entire process. And fixing processes is not going to rebuild that trust between Linus and Kent. Even though the file system is currently marked experimental, it still has upstream expectations. And maybe if we just break this down, we can say that we should be trying to fix the people here and not the code. Anyways, interesting. Let's see what people have to say to this one. As Kent chimes in, but before we do, if you enjoy videos like this, make sure to subscribe below. Smash that like button so it gets out to more people. Let's continue on with what Kent has to say. In response to the very first paragraph. Generally, this drama is more like a kindergarten. Yes, this is accurate. I've been getting entirely too many emails from Linus about how pissed off everyone is, completely absent of details or anything engineering related for that matter. Lots of, you need to work with us better, i.e. bend to demands, without being willing to put forth an argument that stands to scrutiny. This isn't high school, and it's not a popularity contest. This is engineering, and it's about engineering standards. Those engineering standards have notably lacking in the Linux file system world. When ButterFS or BCacheFS shipped, it did so with clear design issues that have never been adequately resolved. These were brought up on the list in very early days of BCacheFS when it was still experimental. With detailed analysis, that was ignored. The issues in BCacheFS are the stuff of legend. I've been to conferences past LSFs where the dinner and the stories kept coming out from people who had worked on it for easily an hour and had people falling out of their chairs. As a result, to this day, people don't trust it, and for good reason. Multi-device data corruptions, unfixed bugs with no real information, people who have tried to help out and fund getting this stuff fixed only to be turned away. This stuff is still going on. And then we get a link here. This is what you'd expect to happen when you rush to have all the features, skip the design, and don't build a community that's focused on working with others. Let's compare what's going on with BCacheFS. Does BCacheFS even have a central bug tracker? As an important note with BCacheFS, most of the activity doesn't happen on the bug tracker. It's on the IRC. And the IRC channel is by far the most active out of all the major file systems. The bug tracker is for making sure bugs don't get lost if they can't get fixed right away. Most bugs never make it there, so the bug tracker is a good measure of outstanding bugs, but not fixed bugs for gauging usage. How did we get here? What are we doing differently? And where are we now? The recipe has been patient, methodical engineering with a focus on the user and building a user community and working closely with people who are using it, testing and QAing. Get the design right, keep the code base reasonably clean and well organized so that we can work efficiently. Heavy focus on assertions, automated testing, i.e. basic modern engineering best practices, introspection, and bug tooling. Get enough feature work done to validate the design and then fix every last bug, and work with users to make sure that the bugs are fixed and it's working well. Work with people who are doing every kind of torture testing imaginable. A refrain I've been hearing has been about working with the community. But to the kernel community, I need to hammer the point home that the community is not just us. It's all the people running our code too. We have to actively work with those people if we want our code to actually work reliably in the real world. And this is something that's been frighteningly absent elsewhere in the file system development these days. 30 years ago, Linux took over being a real community effort. But now, most of the development is very corporate, and getting corporate developers to actually engage with the community and do anything that smells of unpaid support is worse than pulling teeth. It just doesn't happen. Now BCacheFS is the community-based up-and-comer, but it's not really up-and-coming anymore. 6.16 is unofficially experimental. It's solid. It's attracting real interest and feedback from ZFS community, and that hasn't happened before. Those are people who care about reliability and good engineering above all else. All the hard engineering problems are solved. Stabilizing is basically done. We've got petabyte scalability, the majority of online file system check in place. All the multi-device stuff looks rock solid, a major area where BCacheFS falls over. The error handling, logging, debugging tools are top-notch. Repair is comprehensive and robust with real defense in depth, and an extensive suite of tools for analyzing issues and making sure we can debug anything that may occur in the wild. The kernel community has been caught with their pants down here. The decision-making process has, at every step in the way, been things couldn't possibly be that insane, and yet I am continually proven wrong. Post BCacheFS, I seriously expected there to be a real design review for any future file systems and retrospective on the development process. Needless to say, that didn't happen. It seems we're still in the trust me bro, I got this stage in the development of an engineering culture. But a cowboy culture only takes you so far. At some point, you really need actual engineering standards. You need to be able to explain your designs, your methods, your process, and your decision making. I've talked at length in the past about a need for tight feedback loop on getting bugs out to users if we want to be able to work with those users. And to be honest, that should not have even been a discussion. I've been going over release candidate pull requests, and there's been nothing remotely unusual about what I've been sending, except for volume, which is exactly what you want and expect for a file system that's rapidly stabilizing. But shipping bug fixes has been called whining. That's the mentality we're dealing with here. I have to hammer on this one. There are certain bedrock principles of systems engineering we all know. Make sure things work and stay working is one of them. The rest of the kernel knows this and do not break user space. But in file system land, the same underlying principle is written as we do not lose user data. Our job is to ship things that work and make sure they work. I also talk a lot about the need for automated testing, and that's another area where the kernel is woefully behind. And it's been one of the sources of conflict. I've asked people in other subsystems to please to make sure they test when regressions have hit BCacheFS. It's good for everyone, not just BCacheFS, but this has been cited as one of the causes of conflict that's been pissing Linus off. Engineering principles, basic stuff here, and regarding the management process, Linus has been saying repeatedly and loudly and in public that it's his decision whether or not to remove BCacheFS from the kernel, but the criteria and the decision-making process have been notably absent. It is not for me to say whether or not the kernel should be able to be a personal project with decisions made in this way. And at the end of the day, we are all human beings. I'm not going to argue against the human factor or against considering the people behind the projects, but the uncertainty this has caused has created massive problems for building sustainable developer community around this thing. It should be noted. For my part, I just want to reassure people that I'm not going anywhere. BCacheFS will continue to be developed and supported in or out of the kernel. Cheers, Kent. What a long-winded response here, as Kent argues to push against the freezing of BCacheFS. He's framing the dispute as a process breakdown, of course not a technical failure, as he positions BCacheFS as a methodical file system that's user-driven. He's clearly frustrated with the kernel community norms and how they make decisions, as he personally views BCacheFS as a production-ready system. He sees the removal of his file system as harmful to the sustainability of file systems and seems very defensive and combative. While full of technical justification, the message carries a defensive tone and confrontational view when it comes to kernel leadership, calling it cowboy culture and trust me bro, especially in the file system portion of the kernel. It's an interesting take from Kent here, long-winded, but we're glad to hear from him. Let's see how people respond to all of this. And we're going to continue talking about this, but before we do, if you want to level up your Linux experience today, check out my checklist, cheat sheet, and mind map, all available at SavvyNik.com. Download them today. Now another person chimes in, Joseph here, says exactly, which is why the meta infrastructure is built completely on BCacheFS. And its features, we have saved billions of dollars in infrastructure costs with the features and robustness of BCacheFS. BCacheFS does not need me or anybody else wandering around screaming about how everyone else sucks to gain users. The proof is in the pudding. If you read anything that I've wrote in my commentary about other file systems, you will find nothing but praise and respect, because this is hard and we all make our trade-offs. The courtesy has been extended to you in the past and still extends to you and your file system, because I don't need to tear you down or your work down to make myself feel good. And because I truly believe you've done some great things with BCacheFS, things I wish we had the foresight to do with BCacheFS. I'm yet again having to respond to silly childishness because people on the outside do not have the context or historical knowledge to understand that they should ignore every word that comes out of your mouth. If there are articles written about these claims, I want to make sure that they are not unchallenged and thus viewed as if they were true or valid. Emails like this are why nobody wants to work with you. Emails like this are why I've been on literally dozens of email threads, side conversations, chat threads, and in-person discussions about what to do when we have exceedingly toxic developers in our community. Emails like this are exactly why we have to do a code of conduct. Emails like this are why a majority of the community filters your emails to dev null, which is a reference in to send his emails to archives or just the void. You alone with your toxic behavior have wasted a fair amount of mine and other people's time trying to figure out how do we exist in our place of work with somebody who is bent on tearing down the community and the people who work in it. I have defended you in the past. I was hoping that the support, guidance, and the grace you've been afforded by so many people in this community would have resulted in your behavior changing. I'm very sorry I was wrong, and I am very sorry if my support in any way enabled the decision to merge your file system. Because your behavior is unacceptable, this email is unacceptable. Everything about your presence in the community has been a disruption and has ended up with all of our jobs being harder. You are not some pariah. You are not some victim. You're not some misunderstood genius. Your behavior makes this community a worse place to work in. If you are removed from the community, it will solely be because of the lack of availability to learn and to grow as a person and take responsibility for your behavior. If you are allowed to continue to be in this community, that will be a travesty. Thanks, Joseph. And whoa, what a response from Joseph here, as he's clearly in disagreement. Not because of technical direction, it's personal, and it's because of Kent's behavior in front of the Linux kernel mailing list audience. It reframes the debate from technical to personal credibility. The trust comes back in. It uses moral authority and personal history. It's explicit and is publicly countering Kent's narrative that he just got done building. Joseph's email here is essentially a reputational nuke that is telling everyone on the list that working with Kent is not worth it. And it comes from someone who's supporting BCacheFS at Meta and from his personal experience working with Kent. Very interesting, as the disputes have now really started going in this email thread. Mind you, Linus is carbon copied on every single one of these, so you can imagine what he's thinking in the background. Let's move on. That's great for Facebook, but you're doing everyone else a disservice. The big cloud providers do not require as much reliability from individual nodes. I've provided data in the form of bug reports and actual user reports. You've provided no data on reliability within Facebook, nor which feature set is being used. It's the multi-device stuff that's been absolutely notorious. Synology famously still uses MD RAID to avoid that, right hole and all. This is real, Joseph. I've seen time and again how corporate development works. I've been at Google. I've worked with Red Hat enough to see their model. And within the file system world, engineering standards have not been what they should be. And the wider community, i.e. the rest of the world, not just the tech giants, it's not being served. Cal file systems were supposed to bring improved reliability over conventional file systems. It's been known for decades that update in place is a massive problem if we want real advances in reliability. ZFS showed that was possible, but the common consensus is that user community among people with data, i.e. quite a few of the distros, is that the BCacheFS dropped the ball and regressed reliability from ext and XFS. That's common knowledge. At this point in development and deployment in BCacheFS, I can say with confidence that BCacheFS is changing that, and that at this time we deliver better reliability than ext4 and XFS. That's why my work has been funded. That's what people want, and that's why I'm talking about it. Interestingly enough, Kent decides to go back to comparisons, comparing other file systems to his own. This seems to be a very common theme in the way that Kent tries to win arguments. Although it's hard to say whether these types of things actually help his cause, as it seems like he just keeps pointing the finger at everyone else. Regardless, let's keep moving on. He does come back and add in, I should add, based on the data I'm seeing, this isn't far off, but due to the sheer amount of deployment and usage in ext4 and XFS it'll be a while, perhaps a year, before we have the data to make hard claims. The data from users versus BCacheFS is much clearer. We already are delivering a much better reliability in terms of, will my data be safe? There are numerous failure modes that simply don't exist in BCacheFS, and where we've had significant bugs, I count somewhere in the ballpark of 2 that have made it all the way to mainline 0.0 release. Good debugging tools and clean design have meant that we've been able to resolve them by about the 3rd report, and in every case with significant hardening done after the fact and real support for effective users. IOW, your data is safe on BCacheFS, and that's priority number 1 for a file system. Continuing to do comparisons, but now we have another person jump in. Theodore from MIT. Kent, you seem to have ignored the primary point of Joseph's message and instead proceeded to prove exactly what he was pointing out. Let me quote the most relevant parts of his email in case you missed it. BCacheFS doesn't need me or anybody else wandering around screaming how everybody else sucks to gain users. And how did you respond? By criticizing another file system and talking about how wonderful you believe BCacheFS to be. All of which is beside the point. In fact, once again, you demonstrated exactly why a very large number of kernel developers have decided you are extremely toxic and have been clamoring that your code be ejected from the kernel, not because of the code, but because of your behavior. In general, file system developers have been the ones that have been arguing that you should be shown more grace because we respect the work that you've done. However, don't mistake respect for your code with respect for your behavior. There are many developers in the adjacent subsystems, for example, Block and MM, who have lost all patience with you. This is not just one or two people, so don't blame this on people who have been trying to reach out and help you see what you have been doing. Quite frankly, it is astonishing to me how many people who have been arguing for git remove r recursively file system bcachefs, meaning remove the entire tree from the kernel, as soon as the merge window opened and effectively asking why Linus has been extending as much grace as he has up until now. Programming is a team effort and you have pissed off a very large number of people on that team. It doesn't matter how talented of a particular individual might be if they can't work with other people on the team. If they are toxic to the community, it doesn't matter whether or not they might be technically correct on a particular point or not. Many decades ago, when I was working group chair for IPsec, there was a particular individual who was super smart and who was often technically on point. Unfortunately, he had the habit of appending phrases such as any idiot could see, at the end of what might otherwise be a very insightful comment. It didn't matter what the point that he raised was, one that was A, correct, and B, dismissed by other people in a working group. The way that he phrased it meant that no one wanted to listen to what he had to say. Because I wanted the iSpec standardization to succeed, I acted as that person's intermediary, rephrasing his arguments and technical points in a way that was much easier to understand and, more importantly, stripped of all of the ad hominem asides. It took a huge amount of work and psychic toil, and it isn't something I would ask someone else to do. All of this being said, unless you can find someone willing to be your intermediary and hopefully your coach in how to better work with other people, I fear that the only thing we can do is to find the most graceful way for you to leave the community. And fortunately, I'm very glad that at the end of the day, it's not up to me. Signed off, Ted. Ted definitely brings up some points here, and maybe it would be nice to have an intermediary person helping Kent along, but I think we're way too far gone. And Kent doubles down here. I would dearly love to not have opened that up in response. But let's now delete BCacheFS from the kernel, opened up by that discussion, because our first priority has to be doing right by users. And a decision like that should absolutely be discussed publicly, well in advance, with all technical arguments put forth. Or was that going to happen without giving users advance notice, without a discussion of why we need a file system that's prioritizing basic reliability and robustness? Moreover, work as service to others is something I think is worth thinking about. We're not supposed to be in it for ourselves. I don't write code to stroke my own ego. I do it to be useful. I honestly can't remember the last time I wrote code purely for enjoyment or worked on a project because it was what I wanted to work on. My life consists of writing code based on what's needed to fix a bug, to incorporate a good idea by someone else, or to smooth something over to make someone else's life easier down the line. Very rarely does it come from my own vision. My feelings are entirely secondary to the work I do, and yet again, in this thread, we keep hearing about how pissed off people are and how that's supposed to be our primary concern. I'm afraid I cannot agree. And if someone else is going to start outright swearing over technical criticism, that's a flagrant code of conduct violation and just beyond unprofessional. That is one of the interactions you guys are apparently basing this one, and that wasn't me. And if I have to point out that this has been escalated over and over and over over a patch that was purely internal to the file system tree BCacheFS. I think you guys have been taking this a bit too far. A little cryptic here, as we don't have the actors in all of this. Talks of deletion and being pissed off, swearing, and what exact incident that Kent's talking about here. It would have been interesting to see a little more explanation, as I'm not quite following at this point. But we'll keep reading on. Sasha steps in here by saying, Kent, you first say our priority has to be doing right by users. And I agree. But doing right by users means maintaining a healthy, functioning development community. A toxic community that drives away contributors fails its users far more severely than the absence of a single file system ever could. Look at this thread again. Really look at it. Neither Ted nor Joseph raised a single technical argument against BCacheFS. They didn't criticize your code, your design decisions, or your engineering. Joseph explicitly praised your technical work. Ted had repeatedly shown respect for your code. The discussions about potentially dropping BCacheFS aren't happening because it's technically inferior to ext4, XFS, or BTreeFS. They're happening because your personal interactions are undermining the health of the community that maintains all of these file systems. Work as a service to others. Service to others includes maintaining professional relationships with your colleagues. It includes building rather than tearing down. It includes recognizing a healthy community serves users better in the long run than any individual contribution, no matter how technically excellent. The kernel has thrived for 30 years, not just because of technical excellence, but because it has mostly maintained a collaborative environment where developers can work together despite disagreements. The collaborative environment is doing right by users. No file system is worth destroying that. Thanks, Sasha. Quite some compelling words here from Sasha, seemingly arguing that the Linux community and maintainership is great the way it is, as it's a collaborative environment where people can work through their differences. So let's continue on. Kent replies, then can we please drop all this madness? I do hereby solemnly swear that I will refrain from criticizing BTreeFS ever again or any other code anywhere in the kernel, if that is the wish, as long as Linus stops trying to dictate on patches internal to the file system BCacheFS tree. If it affects the rest of the kernel, that's fair game. I just want to be able to get work done. Mind you, this all stems from the fact that Linus did not want to pull in a merge request made by Kent with a new tool that would help with the bug that was found during the release candidate phase of Linux Kernel 6.16, I believe. And the major reason behind it was Linus does not put new untested tools into the Linux kernel, and especially during the release candidate phase of things, that is an absolute no-go. And that's just some background to understand where this all came from. But regardless, let's keep going on as we have just a couple more to read. Please excuse sending this again because I forgot to put it in plain text mode. Been watching the thread unfold. There are valid concerns, sure, but I'd caution folks against mistaking frustration for hostility. Kent's been carrying a heavy load with BCacheFS, and it shows. Solo stewardship at this scale isn't just technical, it's psychological. When someone's under pressure and feels attacked, responses get sharp. That's not ideal, but it's not malicious either. If we're serious about maintaining a healthy kernel community, we need to be better about recognizing when someone's burning out and not make it worse. The code of conduct isn't just there to call out bad behavior, it's supposed to guide us towards empathy and restraint. Kent, if you're reading this, it's clear that you're reacting to what feels like a pile-on. That's understandable. But at this point, stepping back might serve you better than continuing to reply. Let the code speak. Let others weigh in. You've done the hard part now, give it room. And really, this whole thread feels beneath what the kernel community should be. If there's a serious question about BCacheFS's future, it ought to be a quiet, direct conversation between Kent and Linus, not a public spectacle. We've seen how these things go and rarely ends well unless someone redirects tone. And a public spectacle it has become, as we're literally reading through the back and forth here between devs. It's kind of sad to see all this unfold the way it has unfolded. We're going to look at one more response from Kent as things kind of unravel after the fact, which we may check out in another video, especially if Linus Torvalds decides to respond. But we can now get an overall feeling for how the Linux dev community has been reacting to this. Let's look at Kent's response to all of this. Thanks. I really appreciate this response. The thing is, the burnout isn't coming from BCacheFS. It has been an absolutely monumental effort, but looking back and where we're at now, I can't describe how lucky I and BCacheFS community have been at how smoothly it's gone. I've been doing storage for a long time, and I know what can happen when things go badly. When I look at the bug tracker now, I can count my lucky stars. And the BCacheFS community has been amazing. I have a ton of people I work with on a daily basis, and people see and appreciate the work I do. When people show up with bugs to report, people are often shocked at how quickly we're able to get it sorted. It's almost always downright pleasant experiences where we all get to learn from something and someone new joins the community. I'm honestly proud of the community I've built and proud of the people I work with. We've got more engineers coming in and getting up to speed on the code. Thank you, Alan, for all the work you've done on the Syzbop bugs. Funding is now stable. Thank you, Valve. They've done a lot of amazing stuff for Linux, but dealing with the upstream has left me at my wit's end. And well past that, I'm not going to describe the effects it's caused. I'll just leave off there. So clearly Kent does have a lot going on, and it's clearly taking a toll, all this back and forth, the Linux community and other maintainers and devs and himself. It's sad to see how this has all played out, as we still haven't seen a response from Linus, although we've seen his silence speak at this point, as Linus has not merged any of these latest changes in what would show up in Linux Kernel 6.17, as that window has opened up for merge requests. The one we looked at the very beginning of this video has to this day not been merged. Linus has not made any public response, and we are all just waiting to see the fate of BCacheFS. As it stands now, it's being frozen out of the kernel, meaning we're not going to be receiving any new updates. Unless things change, we may be seeing it completely removed and cleaned out of the kernel before long. Much like RiserFS, although that was a completely different situation, a file system can be completely removed from the Linux kernel tree. Will that happen to Kent? I'm not sure. Or will it just be a temporary freeze so that, as other people have suggested, Kent can spend some time thinking about what went wrong, maybe come to terms, and approach the community in a better sense. We'll see what comes out of all of this. I want to know what you think about the back and forth here. Do you think Kent and his technical wisdom is right, or do you think the people who have been having to deal with all that technical wisdom are correct? Either way, let me know what you think about this whole situation in the comments section below. I'd love to hear from you. Also, don't forget, while you're down there, subscribe and smash that like button so other people can get a chance to view this back and forth. Catch me in a great community on Discord, and I'll catch you in another video. Thanks for watching.